Welcome back to artofdino.com, and I hope you all had an incredible new year. It's time to dive back into some thoughts and theories on all of this and our ancient past. And so this video is for all the brickers and the melt heads and the stoners and the all the people that deal with the thoughts relating to the towers and the bricks and the stones that were used during construction. I found this random article from about the 1600s that talks about towers in Rome and different kind of structures that were made according to Pliny and according to other different people, and how they used it, how the brick was used, how the stone was used, what they associated with. I don't know the exact reality of it. I don't really have any stock in this game. I just found this and wanted to put it out there for the brickers, the stoners, and all the people that really talk about that, because, you know, my jury's still out. I really don't know. Mud flood, all this stuff. But I see these bricks, I see the stone, you know, the bricks having an electrical charge, having a power. Did the stones have the same thing? Were they putting certain minerals in them? Who built these inevitably? And how thick were they? How did they make them so strong? All this kind of stuff. And some of it is answered in this paragraph, or I mean this couple pages that I've got here. So I want you all to check it out. You all will most likely have more insight than I do on this, and so definitely put it in the comments below. Feel free to share it with others and see if you can what you can pluck from this, because I think there's something important here. I'm just not exactly sure what. But I know that these buildings in their prime were something special, and there's something that I don't think even any artworks can even show what they were truly like at one point. And so we got to use our imagination, we got to dig deep, and we got to piece clues together. And so maybe this will connect some of the dots for you guys out there. So I'm going to read these 3 pages and take a look at some amazing artwork, some amazing architecture, and let the theories fly. So here we go. Some observations upon the ruins of a Roman wall and multi-angular tower at York by the judicious Mar Leicester Esquire. So here we go. I carefully viewing the antiquities of York, and particularly what might relate to the Roman Empire, of which this place had been a feat in the dwelling of at least 2 of the emperors, Severus and Constantine. I found a part of a wall yet standing, which is undoubtedly of that time. It is the south wall of the Mint Yard, being formerly a hospital of St. Lawrence. Just looking towards the river, it consists of a multi-angular tower, which did lead to Bootham Bar, and about blank yards of wall, which ran the length of Coning Street, as he who shall attentively view it on both sides may discern. So some of the writing is a little light, so excuse me if I go a little slow. But the outsides towards the river is the most worth taking notice of. It is faced with a very small saxum quadratum of about 4 inches thick, and laid in levels like our modern brickwork. This sort of building Vitruvius calls after the Greeks, Isodamum cum omnia coria aqua craftiduni fiorint structa, which loosely Google translates into, and thus the house was built when all choria was crossed by water. I'm not sure what that means, but the length of the stones is not observed, but are as they fell out in hewing. From the foundation 20 courses of this small squared stone are laid, and over them 5 courses of Roman brick. These bricks are laid some lengthwise and some endwise in the wall, and were called lateris diatoni. After these 5 courses of brick, other 20 courses of small square stone, as before described, are laid, which raise the wall blank feet higher, and then 5 more courses of the same Roman bricks are overlaid, beyond which the wall is imperfect and capped with modern building. Note that in all this height there is no casement or loophole, but one entire and uniform wall, from which we guess the wall to have been built some courses higher after the same order. So what are we seeing? Are we just seeing like inside layers? How many layers? And how many rocks and stones and jarbled things that they claim are from icebergs and all that nonsense that are all over the place are actually from broken down buildings and massive structures? I've always wondered that. The reason of this order of brickwork intermixed with stone, the same Vitruvius gives, and in this particular the Romans after his time, and upon his admonition and recommendation, in all probability did imitate the Greeks. It says, longitudinus coriore, there's another Latin here, which I'm not going to butcher, but I did translate it, and it says this. The lengths of the leathers are arranged in the thickness of the other bindings. They interpose each one with a continuous thickness of each other. On the other hand, the fronted bricks, which they call diatans, which strengthen the solidity of the wall by binding them together. So this is some comprehensive structure stuff that they weren't doing in the 1800s when they just had horse and carriage, that they claim they were doing. These bricks were to be as throws, or as it were so many new foundations, so that which was to be superstructed, and to bind the two sides together firmly, for the wall itself is only faced with small square stone, in the middle thereof filled with moral and pebble. Frontibus servient, says the author, in menius sarcunt. That means they serve on the fronts and fill in the middle. So someone out there is going to understand most of this, but here we go. Which Vitruvius discommends in the Romans of his time, and therefore the later Romans, the builders of our wall, did, as I said, correct this error and imitate the Greeks. In least, it should seem strange that bricks should give a firmness to stone buildings. The same Vitruvius testifies, and therefore commends brick buildings before stone, are men indeed for wholesomeness, which also is true, and to be much considered in a cold and moist climate. Even for the duration, and therefore in Rome, abatement was ever made for the age of stone building, none for that of brick, provided it kept its level and stood upright upon its foundation. And therefore to excuse it, he at large gives a reason why the Romans suffered not brick buildings to be made within the city of Rome, as a thing not of choice, but necessity. These brick buildings being certainly, in that great architect's opinion, to be preferred, the law says, he suffers not a wall to be made to the streetward. For so give me leave to interpret communi loco, above 1.5 feet thick, and partition walls the same, lest they should take up too much room. Now brick walls of 1.5 feet thick, unless they were diplingthy or triplingthy, I'm not sure what that means, cannot bear up above 1 story. But in so vast and majestic a city as old Rome, there ought to be innumerable habitations. Therefore, when a plain area or building of 1 story could not receive such a multitude to dwell in the city, therefore the thing itself did compel them to it, that the houses might be raised higher, and therefore they had strange contrivances of our jetting and overhanging stories and balconies, etc., which reasons it rightly considered our great mistakes. Our men at this day have taught the world better things, and have demonstrated that a firm building may be raised to many stories height upon 1.5 feet thick wall. The oversight of the Romans was the vast bigness of their brick, for the lesser the brick, the firmer the work, there being much greater firmness in a multitude of angles, as must be produced by a small brick, than in a right line, and this is the reason of the strength of buttresses in multi-angular towers. I like that. Those bricks are about 17 inches of our measure long, and about 11 inches broad, and 2.5 inches thick. This, having caused several of them to be carefully measured, I give in round numbers, and do find them to agree very well with the notion of the Roman foot, which the learned antiquary Greaves has left us, viz. Of its being about 1/2 inch less than ours. They seem to have shrunk in the baking, more in the breadth than in the length, which is but reasonable, because of its easier yielding that way, and so for the same reason more in thickness, for we suppose them to have been designed in the mold for 3 Roman inches. Now that this was properly the Roman brick, we have the testimony of Vitruvius and Pliny. Of Vitruvius, Fiunt laterum ira genera. Let me translate this because it's a whole paragraph. So according to Vitruvius, there are 3 kinds of shunt laterum. One which is called in Greek didoron, which is used by ours. And then Pliny says there are 3 kinds. Didoron, which we use, is 1.5 feet long and 1 foot wide. So they go on to say, but we are to note that the copy of Vitruvius, where it describes the measures of the didoron, is vicious, and is to be corrected by Pliny. And had not Vitruvius's commentator been more of a friend to his author than to truth, he had not persuaded the contrary, for the bricks themselves do demonstrate at this day Pliny's measures to be right, and nor those of Vitruvius, as they are extant, which makes me much wonder at the confidence of Daniel Barbarus, affirming the bricks now to be found are all according to Vitruvius and not Pliny's measures. For all that I have yet seen with us in England are of Pliny's measures, as at Leicester in the Roman ruin there called the Jews' Wall, at St. Albans, as I remember, and here with us at York. And those places are all insane. The architecture there is mind-blowing, and there's definitely some questionable history of the architecture in truth regarding it. Something ancient was there. And to go no further for arguments then, this very chapter of Vitruvius, the Diplinthes Parietis in Rome were against law, and the single brick wall was only allowed as standard, viz. a 1.5 foot thick wall, or 1 Roman brick in length, as was noted above. Pliny lived sometime after Vitruvius, and being a professed transcriber, and as it appears from this very place, having taken the whole business of brick almost verbatim out of him, and not differing in any one thing in the whole chapter, but in this, or the measure of the didoron. In the bricks demonstrating the truth of that difference, it is but reasonable we should make Vitruvius's longum pedilatum semipede a fault of Vitruvius's copiers. And that translates to 1 foot long and 1/2 foot wide. So it's interesting when you get these transcribers and these people that are getting them, and the things that change, the things that can be manipulated with each publishing. You really can never tell. I shall conclude this discourse with this remark, that proportion in a plain uniformity, even in the minutest parts of building, is to be observed, as this miserable ruin of Roman workmanship show. In our Gothic buildings there is a total neglect of the measure and proportion of the courses, as though that was not much material to the beauty of the whole, whereas indeed in nature's works it is from the symmetry of the very grain whence arises much of the beauty of the thing. Indeed, if I was never to come near a building and to view it always at such a distance, this might be excused as to me, and join artificial things, as in pictures and carvings, to be seen on high. But yet, in my opinion, 'tis but an excuse of laziness to tell me such and such rude dashes will have a marvelous effect at a distance, as though things painted or carved to adorn our comparatively low rooms were distanced. In this noble art, in my opinion, has of late in nothing suffered so much with us as in admitting of this vile excuses, whereas indeed what is well done and most exactly finished in the most minute parts of a thing painted, I am sure if it please me near the eye, it will never displease me at a distance. And I totally agree with that as well. That's why I don't, it's regards to my painting. A lot of people paint messes that look great at a distance. I like it to look great at both. But all of this is very interesting because the size of the bricks, these people in Pliny and all in Vitruvius's time had no idea who built these buildings, and they were still kind of dissecting how they did it. So these architects, to me this sounds like there's the grand architects were somewhere down the line, and their work and their craftsmanship was so masterful that we can't even we can't even measure it. You're not even sure how to build it. It takes years and generations and hundreds, centuries for people to kind of figure a lot of this stuff out. And the architecture just they say Roman all the time, but is that the truth? Like, who are the originators of these? Who are the true architects of our world? Was this place built beautifully for us as humanity at one point before we got here? Or did we gradually start from monkeys and start building things and start clicking sticks together, and then all of a sudden we're building these buildings that can't be described, it can't be fathomed, and then now we're back to building dumps out of wood. So there's something there that just absolutely has to be figured out, and it seems like nobody through time really had the answers to a lot of this. They're trying to figure out, the different measurements of bricks at different times. There were different bricks that were used, different stones that were used, and where were these quarried from? Where were these all made? If I almost wonder if a lot of these stone buildings originally were quarried from places that became lakes or rivers or oceans, or could be anything, because they needed a lot of material at one point. And how far do these go down? Again, we're only seeing these things they all have basements, they all have foundations that go far deeper than we can see. And what are those made of? And they were figuring out, but it seems like they're figuring out in this reading that, like, you know, the strength of certain things, the same when you angle, when you use smaller bricks, all these kind of things. But someone at an ancient time had already figured all of this out. So this is all like, this is old news kind of recycled as newer news and discoveries, but it's, in general, it's old news because people were building these things and no one knows how, no one knows where, and no one knows who and for what purpose. We just came here and the people that were in control made them whatever they wanted them to be, without any choice of what they once were. And they've been trying to hide it ever since, and the people in control just constantly don't want us to know how deep they go, where they come from, who built them, why they were here, and just how come the world has gotten to the place it is now, after at one point being the way it was, this majestic, magical, powerful place. So definitely stay tuned for more. I hope all you brickers and stoners out there like this. Maybe some of you can translate it or find some gems in it. You all out there, many of you, the Mudflooders and brickers and stoners, are much better at this stuff than me. Paul Cook, Stuffed Beagle, you guys know a lot more about this than me. You've dived down a lot further. I'm interested in the art and the architecture and all this other stuff, but together we're going to discover all of this with you all out there. So leave your comments below. We will figure this stuff out. If anyone's from Rome and they've seen this or have any good pictures of the size of these bricks or anything, feel free to share at any time. Bless you all.